Marysue, how are you? I've done it again. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. Good
It's
morning.
okay. Good morning. I need to up your volume a little bit.
I'm not sure. I can hear you fine on my end.
Can you? It just feels a little soft to me. Not sure.
Well, I've never been told that before. Thank you. That's very encouraging. I usually get rough around the edges, but never soft. But yeah, thank you.
I guess it's fine.
It's funny. I was looking through phrases and because I was saying something to myself this morning, I goes, I've put myself in a right muddle here. And I know I said to you, pottering, I was just pottering around. And then I thought to myself, I'm like, is pottering around, would that be so ironic because it's a Shakespearean phrase? But it turns out it isn't. So then I went down, and that's the one thing, like, you know, as just chance would have it, I just started looking online. I looked at this big, massive list of Shakespearean phrases. So I'd love to know what your favorite one is as we go through.
Oh, gosh.
That still translates today.
Yeah. So did you find it on the list? Is it Shakespearean?
Pottering around is not. It refers to just, it comes from the potteries, but then it also comes from just sort of being idle and doing little tasks. But in a pickle definitely is, obviously, which is what I found myself in somewhat of this morning. So it was quite ironic in the end. Welcome to the Cross on the Pond podcast, hosted by me, Gary Adair, where we talk to people from all walks of life, artists, educators, entrepreneurs and adventurers, to explore the stories and lessons that can help you understand yourself, others, and create meaningful change in your own life. My guest today is Marysue Moses, a dementia educator, consultant, and former memory care coordinator who spent years helping caregivers and professionals create richer, more human connections with people living with dementia. Long before any of that, she was a theatre kid, trained in London, and later working with the Illusion Theatre in Minneapolis, co-founding Theatre at Work, until her own mother was diagnosed with dementia, prompting her to bring that storytelling instinct into memory care. On the eve of the release of her new book, Looking Past Dementia, Marysue joins me today to talk about what theatre taught her about connection and what dementia has taught her about hope. Obviously, selfishly, I want to start with the England thing because you did study in the UK.
I did.
As part for theatre school?
Yes, I did.
How was that?
It was wonderful. I was so excited to be there. I had to wait a whole year to go after I first auditioned. I auditioned in New York City and got a letter back from the drama school saying, I'm sorry, we have too many Americans all lined up to come this year. You'll have to wait till next year. So I had to wait. So I was a waitress for a year, you know, kind of like you do with your theater background after college. And after that year, I was able to go. And I absolutely loved it. It was such an adventure. You know, I was 24 years old and, you know, just really ready to be somewhere that wasn't Cleveland, Ohio, which is where I went to college. Was what I remember about Cleveland is that it rained every single Monday, you know, just without fail. It was just like, ugh. I loved just the feel of things. I loved how crowded it was and all the, you know, the buildings close together and the theater. You know, I really wanted to get more training in acting and especially Shakespeare. And so, yeah, it was just a blast. Made some good friends and, you know, it was just a great time to kind of soak all that all in.
Was there anything that stuck with you from your time in England? Whether it was, were you an advocate for the food is not as bad as everyone says it is? Were you like more of akin to the humor at that point?
Yeah, I don't remember, you know, feeling like the food was terrible. I became a tea drinker, you know, for sure, you know, not coffee, tea. And then, of course, when I came back to the States, I started drinking coffee again. But I think it took me a while to actually transfer back to coffee. But I was really into my morning tea, you know, like everybody was.
My wife's from England as well, and we're very, what would be the word? Firm and fast on our tea habits. So whenever we go to somewhere, it's very difficult sometimes to go and order a tea because you never quite know what you're going to get. And I was always like very, you know, carefree about this. But since I married my missus, it's been very militant about how we take our tea. So I just started drinking. I just started drinking coffee. I know I started drinking coffee in the UK so much. So You talk about going to college in Cleveland, and obviously we talked on the phone the other day, but you went to school in New Jersey and actually performed Shakespearean stuff in Jersey.
Well, I went to high school in New Jersey.
Okay.
Yeah. And my whole, grade school, everything, junior high. And yes, I was in a production of Hamlet and I played Gertrude. And that really got me started on loving Shakespeare and wanting to do more of it. And then when I went to college, I was in 2 different Shakespearean plays, which just kind of fed that some more. But the friendships forged during that with the cast. I mean, we already had a very close friend group of people. It was just fantastic. We were just all, over the moon about doing it. And who knows what I'd think of it if I had to sit and watch a movie of it right now. I might be like, oh my God.
Oh no, come on, it'd be very nostalgic. At the time though, was that always going to be the track for you? Like I know things have taken a little bit of a turn in certain directions, but as you've gone through, but was that always going to be the track? Theatre, route, the arts?
Yes. Yeah. When I was 12, I wanted to be an actress.
Right.
So that was going to be my way. I was madly in love with Julie Andrews, and she really propelled me into, wanting to take drama classes when I got to that point where I could choose.
So when you come back from England, I would say you went for a year and you would have been 25, 26 when you came back to the US.
Yeah.
What did life look like for you then when you came back?
Well, when I came back to join a theater company in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, called the Illusion Theater. I actually auditioned for them when I was in London because somebody that I had worked with at a summer drama opportunity thing knew these people who were the head of the Illusion Theater, and they just happened to be going to London for, I don't know, for fun or something. And so I was able to arrange an audition at my drama school with them. And then they invited me to come and be part of the company. My other option was going to be staying in London and doing another year of the program. I wasn't really sure when I started if I'd go for more than 1 year. But when I had this opportunity to have a job with a theater company, I couldn't say no to that. So I worked with them for a couple of decades before I kind of went out on my own. And I worked with a friend who also exited Illusion Theater. It's all a long story. But we did something called Theater at Work. We created a company that went around and did theater trainings, theater-based trainings on, stuff like sexual harassment in the workplace and hiring, discipline, and termination, and diversity issues, and this was really way before that was really a big deal.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, how common was that? I mean, the fact that you've recognized, and I know it was like, I don't know, because I'm not trying to date you in any way, but I imagine it was like, oh yeah, it's just part of the business, like it happens, things happen, people keep themselves quiet because they want to progress. But you've actually had the foresight to go, no, this is something that needs to be addressed, and I'm going to go and do it.
Yeah. And we worked with experts too. I mean, we were the ones to create scenes and perform them, but we always had, attorneys with us talking about sexual harassment and the law and all that stuff, because we weren't, all up on all of that, but we could translate stuff that was happening into scenes and give people something to think about.
Did you feel it? Was that always been your way? Like, I mean, because we will get to it, and this is the main reason why you and I are talking today is what you're doing now and how that's progressed. But did you always feel like there was a call into help and give that little bit extra to people around you or around the business or whatever avenues you were going into?
Yeah, I think I must have. I mean, Illusion Theater was very much in that realm in some ways. I mean, we did fun plays, and we did a play about our grandparents. So there were artistic things, more purely artistic things as well. But they also did a sexual abuse prevention piece that I was a part of creating that was called Touch, that went all over the United States. Well, not all over, but we went to a few states.
That's
And,
more than
performed
one.
at different places. And then there were different companies that went around. And so it got spread out.
And do you find
Yeah.
that was well received at the time as well?
Yes, it was very well received.
Did people sort of step forward at that point and say, thank you, I really appreciate what you've done here. That's helped me a lot. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. People would come up afterwards and, say, this happened to me. And, thank you so much for doing this and giving the resources and stuff. Again, there was an expert who was the moderator. We were just acting out the scenes,
Yeah, you're opening the door to say this is what's happening, and it's okay to speak up, and it's okay to recognize it.
Yes, okay to talk about it.
Kind of bridges me what I want to talk about today as well. Is the main topic for you at the moment is working with people with dementia, and it has been something that's been on your radar for a very long time. Did it start with your mother's diagnosis? Is that correct, or am I anywhere close there?
Yeah, yes, that piqued my interest and my curiosity. Nobody in my family knew much about dementia, if anything, when my mother was diagnosed. And it was like a foreign country. It's like, what is this? I didn't really know what it was or what it might be in the future. When, there were definitely some signs that something was off with her when I visited her, along with my daughter, who was about 6 years old at that time. She forgot to pick us up.
Right.
We had set a meeting place where the bus from the Phoenix airport would leave us, and she just didn't show up. And I called and called and called, and she didn't answer. And there were no cell phones back then, so I had to leave a message on the answering machine. And then finally, I had to call my sister to get her address because I couldn't remember it exactly. And so I called my sister, who's always good with that, and found the address, and we took a taxi and showed up. And then my mom just kind of said, I thought you were coming tomorrow. So that was like, it's like really not that big of a deal.
And would your mother have been one of those people that would have been on that anyway? She wasn't like a scatterbrain anyway. It was sort of. Yeah, it was one of those things. Not like me this morning forgetting that Central Time and Eastern Time are two completely different things.
Right. Exactly.
And so how old would you have been at that point?
She was pretty close to 80 at that point, actually.
Oh, that's not bad. I mean, to be honest, that's not a bad run to that point, in fairness.
I know. It's like, yeah.
But so did you, and was anybody, like you've noticed that the first one is not picking up. Was there then sort of a trail of signs after that? Before to the point, what made you to the point where it's like, it's one thing to be forgetful once, but what led to the point where you say we've probably got to go and try and get a diagnosis for this?
Right. Being the youngest of 5, I would have been the last person to step into that role. So what did happen during that visit, there were just a couple of other signs. When she was making dinner, she just seemed a little more stressed. I remember watching her trying to get the oven rack in a different place, and she was just really frustrated trying to get it to work, that kind of thing. And that was new, that was different. The big thing was not something I was there for, but my siblings and I decided that Mom really needed to live closer to somebody in the family, because at that point, she was a widow and there was nobody really close to her there. So it was decided that she would move to Denver, which made sense because I have a brother there and sister was in Boulder at that time. So they were, the primary people caring for her. So they found her a spot in a senior high-rise, no memory care, no even assisted living was discussed at that point. It was just, she needs to be close to family, that's going to make it all better, was probably the hope. And then the first story in my book is the true story of how one night in the middle of the night, she came down and with a little bag packed and asked the security guard to call her a taxi because she needed to go home to Junction City, Kansas, which would have been quite a long taxi ride from from Denver and very
Yeah.
expensive. And if she, I've thought about this a lot. If she wanted to go home there, it really struck me that, she wanted to go home to see her mom and dad. She wanted to go home to see her brothers who were long gone, so
Yeah.
she was really back in time. Maybe even thinking herself 18 years old. She got married at 19. She wasn't going to see her husband. He was dead already. Yeah. I guess I didn't really think about that until I started writing the book, the idea of her being so young in her mind. I just knew I knew she was back in time, but I not that far back in time until I really thought about it.
Now you talk about, and I'm on the siblings thing, because I have 3 siblings, and a lot of people I know have a lot of siblings. Would you, and you say you're the youngest, so you're normally the last one to get in charge of things like that. Would the rest of your siblings have been like, listen, we need to do something here? Like, or would some have been in denial? Would some of them been on the forefront? Like, what was the dynamic of your siblings at that point as well? Especially obviously the people in Denver are on the front line, so to speak.
Yeah.
But then everybody else is kind of getting snippets.
I think we were pretty spread out. My 2 eldest sisters were nowhere near Denver, one in California, one in Wisconsin. Margot, my eldest sister, was probably in touch with Marilyn and Bob in Denver quite a bit. But I don't think there was any conflict or any disagreement at all about what should happen. I think everybody was really quite cooperative. I know there were times between Marilyn and Bob where they maybe felt different about things. I think there was even one point where Bob was thinking of having a little, grandparent shack in the backyard kind of thing. I can't think of the right word for it, but just like having a little home right on his property. And I think my sister,
I think they actually call them granny
no.
flats in England. I think they call them granny. Yeah, okay, granny flat in England. They call them that. I don't know what they call them in America.
Yeah. I could be making that up. So if they listen to this, well, I'll have to explain.
Yeah, you can have that.
Anyway.
That would be another sibling rivalry now. I'm sorry to have even instigated that. I apologize if that's what happens.
Yeah.
I know it would happen with me. So, okay, so you're at the point now where this is a clear diagnosis. People and the family is all together, working together in their own way to help things out. Am I right in saying that out of that, you built what was called like an interactive storytelling program? And it was called, is that the Tales from the Trunk?
Yes, that's that. And that happened because when I went to visit Mom in one of her first memory care communities, it feels like it was the first one to me, but it might have been the second one because I think she was in the first one very briefly. So anyhow, I went and visited. I was with her from, 10 to 5 every day. And there was absolutely nothing for her to do. There was no activity calendar. There was nobody coming in to entertain people or have them do things until the Wednesday when somebody did come in. I guess she was the activities coordinator, and she brought paper and pencils. And I remember sitting at this table with these ladies and just kind of scribbling on the paper. I had no idea. I have no memory of what we were supposed to do or encouraged to do. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. It just made me think, I have to do something about this. I have to bring something the next time I come that's going to be interesting and stimulating for these people. I also was introduced to a woman who I think her name was Jocelyn, who had been an actress, and she had done Shakespeare. When I told her I was really excited about Shakespeare, she went right into all the world's a stage and all the men and women near the players. They have their exits and their entrances. And one man in his time plays many parts. She said the entire speech, letter perfect. And I was so impressed. This was a woman living with dementia in a memory care community. And I thought, wow, okay, we have to do something for her, as well as Mom. And so I think I pretty much on the airplane home, I started thinking about, okay, I could get a trunk on wheels, something that was small enough to go on the airplane, and I could fill it with props and costume pieces and things you could smell, things you could touch, things that would be part of an interactive storytelling thing, so that it wouldn't be just me going blah blah blah, this is the story. It would be everybody participating in bringing the story to life. There'd be narration, but then there would be things people would do. Like I did one show about a folktale, based on a folktale called The Fisherman and His Wife. And in this tale, the sea changes day by day by day. And so I had cloth that was, one time it was green and one time it was yellow and another time it's really angry. And so one person in the audience would hold one end of it and I would hold the other. And, we'd make it really angry or we'd make it very gentle or whatever it had to be.
Yeah, yeah.
And if there were props, mentioned in the story, that we'd pass them around and that kind of thing. So I had, anyway, the folktale, I had a holiday program, I had a spring program, and I had Shakespeareans, my personal favorite, where, I had little snippets of Shakespeare and fun facts and all that kind of stuff.
And they would just grab whatever was in the trunk and then they would reenact it from that.
I'd give them whatever I wanted them to do and have them help me with it.
And how was that received? Because it sounds excellent, because it's a proper interactive activity, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it was very well received. People had a lot of fun, and I did it for some folks in assisted living as well, and they enjoyed it, even though they were not living with dementia. They thought it was cool. And then I started doing it around Minneapolis, St. Paul, and went to lots of different communities. And then I brought it to my mom every time I went out. At least 4 times I did it for her. And that was very satisfying to, put the little baby doll in her arms. And there's one speech, the infant mewling and puking in his mother's arms. And so I would give my mom that, because she loved babies. The one conflict with my siblings that I did have is that I was just learning about how, baby dolls could be used in dementia care. And sometimes women really love to just have a baby to carry around and care for. And they thought it was beneath mom's dignity. And absolutely, we could not give her a baby. And that made me very angry. This was when I was very new in dementia care at this point when I was suggesting it, but that didn't, youngest child.
Did you, no, obviously, yeah, exactly. But at the same time though, did you find that you would get snippets of information out of people that maybe wouldn't have been as provoked if it was just a case of pens and pencils at a table with a piece of paper? Did they come back and give you insight into their life beforehand? Did it provoke anything from them as well, out with the obvious performances?
Good question. I'm trying to remember. I mean, people just seem to enjoy it and enjoy the being able to do something with me rather than just be, an audience member at it. I know they enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about maybe your mum. Your mum might come up with a story about one of you as kids, and you're like, I didn't even remember that. I don't know. And she would say, do you know what I mean? It would kind of, I know sometimes, like you said before, she's living in a different time, maybe at certain moments, but would she come out with something where it's like, oh, wow, that's really insightful. I didn't know that about you. And I find that sometimes with people that I would like a memory or the simple task of holding a baby doll might bring out something out of them.
I've been trained in the time slips storytelling method, which is something that a woman named Ann Basting, who's a very big trailblazer in dementia care, very creative person, made up, and it's a thing you can get training on, and it's quite popular now in dementia communities. And you show people an image of something. It can be might be something that you see on a greeting card that's sort of a staged photo kind of thing, but it sort of has it's easy for people to make up a story about it. And so you give them the picture, and then you start asking these open-ended questions about it, like, well, what should we say this person's name is? What should we say this boy's name is? Or where do you think this takes place? Anything you want. So they get to use their imagination to come up with the details of the story. And then sometimes stuff comes out that you may be from their life or may not be, but sometimes they'll give the name of, their children. They want it to be their children. So that's what I think about when you ask that.
Yeah. So, and
more
you
so
must
than
see.
Tales from a Trunk, which was more of a performance kind of thing,
Right.
but
Okay.
interactive.
I feel like this is your calling at this point. You know, it's one thing to help your mother out, but then you're helping other people out. And it seems like you've really, really branched yourself out here. Did you feel a shift from doing the theatre? Like, are you still involved with Illusion at this point?
Not at this point.
Okay.
Not at this point. After Illusion, it was the theater at work stuff. And then video trainings became more of a big deal rather than theater-based training. So we wound that down. And then it was in that void of time that this stuff happened with my mom, and the Tales from a Trunk thing happened. And because of going around and doing Tales from a Trunk in so many places for several years, I realized I love doing this, and I absolutely love being with these people. I want to be around them. I loved interacting, and that's when I sought the job to be an activities coordinator.
Okay, yes. So you went into that role. Like, what surprised you most on a day-to-day about that role? Because I suppose what I'm trying to get at with all of my questions is that there's a stigma around dementia. Working in it as intensely as you have, there must be things that surprise you on a day-to-day basis that people who believe that stigma for whatever reason don't understand.
Gosh, it was so multifaceted. I mean, I was surprised by the sense of humor people had. I was surprised by the depth of the angst people had sometimes. Where am I? Why am I here? Why am I locked in here? I want to go home, all this stuff. I was surprised at the friendships that developed between people and the tenderness that people had for one another. I was surprised at how readily people trusted me. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of people just, glommed onto me pretty quickly. And that was very, very gratifying. And they were so different from one another. One person with dementia, one person with dementia. That people have different types of dementia. They have different ways that will come out. They handle it differently. They're just completely human beings. They happen to have this thing going on, but they're as different as any other two human beings can be. And so, I think I saw their humanity pretty clearly from the beginning. Their emotions were often very large. It was so interesting to just learn from all these people.
How do you manage that as well? As many different personalities there are, like you just said then, there are so many different types or triggers or causes of dementia, right? So you're not just dealing with everyone's got the same thing and this is how they're going to act. You're talking about different personalities with different triggers or different facets of dementia. Like how did you begin to manage that as well day to day?
I think a lot of it was just trusting my instincts in terms of, okay, this person needs a lot of attention. This person really likes it when I hold their hand. This person doesn't want to be touched. This person is always grumpy, until 1 PM or whatever. And I think just remembering to be on their side, no matter what they're saying or doing or thinking, you just kind of have to be accepting of where they're at, and let them know you're there for them. They definitely need friends. They need somebody on their side. They need somebody who can validate the fact that they're having a hard time. You have to be able to say, that must be so frustrating, or I would feel that way too if I were you. Just always reminding them I'm there for you. I'm on your side.
It's a lot. And you even went on, you're like, this is it. When I say you're all in, you really are all in because you went and did a master's in gerontology. So you're fully committed there and about learning. And when you come through that program, what do you then set out to change again? Because now you're fully qualified. You're qualified enough to know enough about what you're doing as well. You've got the hands-on experience, no question, but you've also now got call it the piece of paper to back it up, but you've now got that extra level of knowledge. Like, What do you set about to try and change at that point?
Well, literally, the project that I did for my master's thesis was about having people from the independent side of our building come on over and volunteer in memory care because there was such a divide, such a stigma, and I could see that these folks in the independent side, when they would see these people in memory care briefly, they were like, I remember her, she used to live over here, and is it okay if I talk to her? So there was a lack of information about dementia, and there was kind of a wish to stay connected with people who had to move over into the memory care side. So anyway, I made my project all about creating a volunteer program. So I trained volunteers, so educated them on some dementia basics, of course, but I trained them to come on over and help out. And they got to see their old friends and make new ones and realize that they're just people and with all their quirks. That was really the big thrust that came from the
Well, I
gerontology
think it does in a
experience.
way, because it's similar to what you talk about when you were doing the, you know, sexual harassment stuff for
Mm.
the outreach to other people. It's almost like an outreach there is go, listen, this is also the other side of it as well.
Yeah, better understanding. And of course these were senior people who were, the same age, if some of them older perhaps
Mm,
than the people in memory care. The relationships that were built was really fun to watch
that's good.
that
That's
that was
really nice.
possible. Yeah, and old friends. I remember one time somebody came in who had not seen this woman for so long, and they just laughed like teenagers when they saw each other, and they were kissing each other's cheek, and just, oh, it was such a sweet reunion for them.
It is nice, isn't it? When, like, that's the thing. Just the empathy and understanding and removing stigmas is everything, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
I just want to make sure I get this right. You worked as a dementia program coordinator for.
Yes.
Could you explain
Ebenezer.
Ebenezer? Yeah, could you
Yeah,
explain that to
Ebenezer
me?
Management Services is a company that I still work for extremely sporadically. I'm semi-retired from the job of, well, I'm not the dementia program coordinator anymore. I'm simply an educator. But yeah, Ebenezer has about close to 40 different senior living sites, and they're a management company. So they hire people to work at all these sites, and they're responsible for, taking care of these folks who come in. So that, there's nurses, there's activities directors and coordinators. Now there's finally a dimensions manager for all the memory cares. That was one thing I really championed, and it took a long while to get that in place, but that's been good.
Is that because of a funding thing or a sort of buy-in, so to speak? It's getting that manager.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was a whole new big job that when I first mentioned it, it took a while to get the management to think it was going to be doable, but they eventually did it. So,
No,
and
that's
it's
that's
really commonplace now. To have a memory care coordinator or some other job title that for somebody who is in charge. It's a good idea.
yeah, 100%. Yeah,
A lot
and
to
then
manage.
and we are going to get to the book as well. So eventually, but you've literally gone from helping your mother out to helping a couple more people out to then getting much more involved as an activities, then a memory care coordinator, then you do your masters, then you're working with Ebenezer. Now you're releasing the book, which has been, I know it's like professional plate spinner, but what has been the biggest jump in that chain for you, do you think?
Yeah. I would say going to Ebenezer and not being day in and day out with people living with dementia anymore was a bit of a jump. It was a little weird not to have that in-person contact all the time. I certainly had some of it, I would always visit people in memory care when I was around a memory care community doing training that day. Um, So either that or the book, because the book was, that was really jumping into a new pool. I've always loved writing, but I haven't really done that much of it. I think I wrote a book when I was 5. And I remember the yellow paper, and it was about stars, but the stars were people, and there was one star that was very little. That was me, of course, because being the youngest of 5 children. Anyway, we don't have to get into that, but yeah, the whole writing the book thing was really exciting because it got me back into the headspace of remembering all those folks I had worked with in the beginning and how much they meant to me, and how much I remembered about them. It just was exciting to write that down after all those years. And I felt kind of bad because after I moved to Ebenezer, I never went back and visited them. And, I understand why I didn't, because they might not have remembered me, and that might have been awkward for me, for everyone. But then they started really rattling around in my head and, demanding to be written. That started happening before I semi-retired. And so by the time I did semi-retire, I was convinced that what I was going to do with my time was write that book.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I can understand both of the, where you say there's arguably 2 jumps there, like the jump from like hands-on to leadership in your capacity as a leader. It's tough, isn't it? Like sometimes you want to be back involved, but you know that you want to also manage everything. But even the book in itself, it's putting yourself out there, isn't it? And that's a big, I mean, I know, you work in the arts where you do things that I would be scared stiff of doing, is going on stage and put myself out there in that way. But recounting all these memories and putting it into this book is a jump, and it's impressive. And I think that's kind of the point of everything I talk about, is you've got to put yourself out there. And I think you have a valuable story to tell, and that's why the book is so important. I also think, like, and if you don't mind, I'd love to bring up your late husband Phil, if it's okay, like if that's something, because
sure.
All this you talk about, the support that you're giving and everything else, it's heavy work, isn't it? Like mentally taxing, emotionally taxing. You need a little bit of an outlet. If you wouldn't mind talking to your late husband, Phil, who was also in the arts as well himself, like what did he do? And how much of a pillar was he for you to lean on or listen to or whatever it was along that journey?
Yeah, he was a huge support. He was so interested in everything, but he was so interested in what I was doing. Every day I'd come home with stories to tell him, pretty much the same stories that are winding up in the book. But I remember one time he said, it's like you're a kindergarten teacher for older people, was one thing he said. But he was so supportive. At one point he was doing a one-man show of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. He memorized the whole story and he played all the parts. And only 12 people saw this performance, or the several performances that happened. But he did it, and he had a connection at a theater that let him do it. And it was just so precious and wonderful. But he, so he had this whole Charles Dickens costume that he had put together, and he volunteered to come on in to memory care, and he just, recited a little excerpt from his play for the ladies, because it was mostly ladies. And they were, of course, thrilled, to have a man come in. That was always very exciting. But, all dressed up in a costume. But so he was very generous. He also suggested, I think we actually talked about me, not real seriously, talked about me doing a book someday. Yeah. And he really believed I should call it Glad Dementia. It's really silly. And when I was thinking of titles for the book, I go to a writing group, and I was one day just really struggling with what I was gonna call this book. And then I thought, oh, maybe Glad Dementia is good. And then I ran that by the group, and they were like, no. Yeah. And I'm very grateful that they set me straight, but it was just very tempting to want to honor Phil by using that title.
Does Phil live in the book? Is there a place for Phil in the book, though, in that
Oh,
context
yeah.
of?
Yeah. I was surprised that he wound up in the book. He was not somebody who ever had a dementia diagnosis, but he was, for 2 full years, he lived with melanoma that started as a brain tumor. And towards the end of his life, he had such a rough time in the last several months. And he had been cast as Hamlet's father in a production of Hamlet at a professional theater in Minneapolis. And he really struggled with, learning the lines and being there fully. And anyway, after a performance one night, he came home, he was exhausted. And in the middle of that night, he was like, "Oh, we need to go to the hospital," kind of thing. And so I drove him there. We had to stop so he could vomit on the way there. And it turned out that his colon had burst. And so he had an operation that night. I remember sleeping on a very small sofa, not knowing if he was going to be alive when I woke up in the morning. But he was. And so, of course, he had a colostomy bag for the rest of his life. And anyhow, he got used to that. We got used to that. It was fine. We still went to the movies once in a while. So I have the story in the book about him, about one time in the middle of the night, he needed to go to the bathroom. And so I followed him into the bathroom. He was bent over, 90 degrees. And I was afraid he was going to fall. And he was like, "What are you doing? Get away from me." It's like suddenly this anger came out from him. And I realized he was acting not unlike a person living with dementia might act. And I thought, "Oh my God, does this mean he has dementia?" And I don't think he did, but it was interesting to have that thought and think about it. And I realized when I wrote the story that it didn't matter whether he did or not. What mattered was that he was still there, and I was going to love him forever, no matter what. So yeah, anyway, that story is a little better written in the book itself.
I did follow, in fairness. It speaks to and you said it before, it speaks to the frustration of people as well. So sometimes it might not be, people will class it as people with dementia will get frustrated, but people get frustrated, whether it's the
Right.
situation that they're in, whether it's whatever. And like you say, you see it as a sign of dementia, or like you see it in people with dementia, but at the same time, it could happen to any one of us in any given moment, given whatever, affliction we have. And it almost normalizes it when you've got your husband in a situation where you're like, right, is this or is this? And he's like, "Just get away from me." It's tragically funny if that makes sense.
Right.
To me anyway. I kind of have that kind of sense of humor. I think you need to, or I certainly in certain things. To that point as well, you talk about, you've mentioned before to me about there's over 200 recognized causes of dementia, and no two people present in the same way on personalities or whatever that is. What should families be looking for when they go in, knowing that there could be 200 potential different variations? It's not just they've got dementia and this is what's going to happen.
Well, it would be great if they could be knowledgeable enough to know that dementia is complicated, that it is, so the many different ways it can present are just, there's just so many different parts to it, and different things to get used to, different things to expect, that it's not just one thing that they're going to be able to kind of put their finger on all the time. It's a journey. It changes from as time goes on. There's new symptoms, or some of the symptoms may get worse. It is a big deal, and it's best to learn as much as you possibly can about it, and remember that there's still a person in there no matter what, and to stay connected with them and give them as much joy and fun and interesting things to do as possible, and to try not to get stuck into the downhill slide of this is the most terrible thing that could ever happen to someone. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's a lovely thing to happen, but I do know that these people can be lovely and they can be funny and they can be a great joy to live with and be around. And it's a piece of life that happens and unfortunately is happening more and more.
Hmm.
With the baby boomers still, get older and turning 65, we're going to be dealing with this in bigger proportions for at least a few more years.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, why is it important to focus on those persons' strengths over the deficits? You talk about, you mentioned about Betsy pole vaulting. How do you find what someone still loves when they just can't verbalize it or they can't
Yeah.
put it out there to you?
Yeah. It's not as hard as you may think, at least for people working in long-term care. Usually there are family members or people who know them well, who, when they come and say, we're thinking we'd like to have this person live in your memory care, they can share things about the person. And uh, it's so important to get that information one way or another. You can also get clues from what is in their room, especially if they do have family that care about them. There's going to be some objects in there, or maybe some trophies or things that really express something about the individual. And it's great to ask about those things or ask the person about them. They may well be able to tell you where they got it and why they love it and why it's important to them, that kind of thing.
Why is establishing a real connection with someone before even attempting something, an activity, why is that so important in general, especially in your discipline?
Trust is the first step that you want to establish. You want to be trusted by these folks. Trust is the basis of relationship, of friendship. And you want to try to be that person's friend or you won't get anywhere with them. So even if you're their relative, you want to make sure you're also friends because it can get pretty terrible if you start treating them like you're their boss or you're their, I don't know, superior in some way. That's not what we want. We want to be on their level and make sure that they can trust us because then the really hard stuff is going to be a little easier to take. There might be a time when somebody needs to think about not driving anymore because maybe they've had too many accidents and it's just getting very dangerous. And that can be a really difficult conversation to have, but if they trust you, that's going to be easier. And it might be actually easier if you're the primary caregiver to maybe find somebody else like a doctor or a lawyer or a trusted friend who's not quite as close to them as you might be emotionally to deliver that message or have the conversation about those hard changes.
Yeah, it's like what you said before, isn't it? Like you've almost got to cross to their mindset instead of setting your stall out on the one side. You've got to, you've got to validate what they're doing or validate what they're saying. What's the danger of buying into this tragedy narrative when it comes to this?
Yeah, it's so bleak and it's so unhelpful, and it's not good for caregivers as well as the person who's living with dementia. It stagnates everything. It's just a miserable way to try to exist, to think that it's the most horrible thing in the world. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe there's some joy. Maybe there's you know ways to give the person a good life in spite of what's going on. I mean, we shouldn't just cave underneath all the seeming bleakness of it. I mean, I've certainly seen a lot of joy, a lot of fun, a lot of involvement that people have. The story in my book that I know you've read about Clarence having this incredible memory about very detailed about meeting the woman who would be his wife, and it's just like a magical story. He knew in that very first moment they were going to be married. It's just so cool, and people people are so much more than we may assume, and we should not assume that just somebody has dementia, that they're not still capable of surprising us and having joy for themselves.
Yeah, it must come. I mean, I've starting to see things now the older I get, and being away from home for such a long time, you do start to see things happen to people, right? People, like you just said then, people get older, it's going to start happening. It's much more prevalent, and it's getting over that initial jolt of a diagnosis, whatever that diagnosis may be. But you've got to learn, you've got to move past it, haven't you? And find a little bit of levity. And because I'm sure people come very reflective, and they're so funny, and they probably bring back stories, and they look back on what's actually happened along their journey already. And it's like you said, the love at first sight from Clarence is hilarious, isn't it? It's enough to make you smile. A lot of the narrative around this podcast is people that are, like made a jump into something new or moved overseas and away from family. And,
Yep.
you were in Denver at the early stages before you started being more heavily involved. Your mother was in Denver and you're up in Minneapolis. And although it's not across an ocean, it's still a heck of a long way. So, you maybe see snapshots or flashpoints of, your mother at these certain stages. Like what would you tell people who are in that situation now, who maybe have a loved one or a family member or somebody who's been diagnosed with dementia, and you only get those snapshots? And why is it important not to embrace that tragedy narrative from so far away?
Well, I think just, when there's that much distance between you and the person, the tragedy narrative could become just ever so much more dangerous because you're not in contact. I would encourage people to be in contact as much as they can be. I mean, there's, video calls, and there's airplanes, and there's, phone calls, if that works for people. There's so much more now than there used to be in terms of keeping in touch. So I think as much as one can, keep in touch, and also keep in touch with whoever is caregiving for their family members, so that they are kind of up on what's going on and what to expect, and not to be surprised or upset about something that's different. Just, keeping in contact, and maybe sending things. And it's still exciting to get mail when you're a person living with dementia, or sending photos, giving reports on grandchildren, all that kind of stuff. People love pictures of grandchildren. So I think there's a lot. I mean, also thinking about honoring that person somehow, thinking about what have I really learned from this person in my life, and maybe writing that down and sending it to the person so that they can, have somebody read that to them.
Like, I have friends who've family members who've suffered with it, and they are a long way away from home. And I think that the advice that you're giving is solid advice. And it's important, and this is the next, it's important to understand that people live with it now, don't they? They don't, it's not a massive afflict. Like, people are, talking about it publicly, living with dementia. There's a lot more of a push towards it now as well, isn't it? That it's not this stigmatized thing. It shouldn't be. It should be treated in a way that's positive, and not positive. That sounds bad, but like, why is it important for it to visibly matter? Like, why is that important now for us to understand it as much as possible?
Yeah.
And have it out there.
Yeah, I think it's really important, because it's true that now there's lots more people out there who are living very well with dementia. There's an organization called the Dementia Action Alliance. They're connected with the Eden Alternative. Those are really cool organizations to look up and learn from. They have conferences. I've been to a bunch of them. The very first time I went to a Dementia Action Alliance conference, I was blown away, because there were people living with dementia on stage talking about how they got diagnosed and how horrible that was, but also what their life is like now. And they were as articulate, if not more so, than you and I are today talking.
Yeah, definitely
And
me.
I was amazed. And then 2 years later, I went back to another conference. Some of the same people were up there they didn't look any different. They didn't sound any different. So it's being proved that it is possible to live well with dementia, especially if you get the help and support that you need, from the very beginning. So I really encourage people to look at the Dementia Action Alliance online. Lots of resources there. I'm sure there's podcasts and groups you can join, and a lot of support there. Really amazing organization. So hopeful.
It's so true, isn't it? Though it's not a banishment sentence. You're not put into exile. You shouldn't be put into exile. Like people, if you nurture people as much as possible, yes, they're living with something, but at the same time, if you nurture them and do the right thing, they can still do everything else that everybody else can do. It's not, that needs to be recognized.
Yeah, some of these people go around the world and speak, at various conferences. It's just amazing. And it's, that sense of purpose that they have is, I think, one of the main things that makes their lives so much better than we might expect that their lives are. So that's like a real clue for the rest of us. Should we wind up living with dementia, we've got to find whatever that purpose is for us and keep doing it. Podcast forever, Gary, forever.
I know. I'll be here all the time. So on the podcast and everything else, but we talked about a little bit about your book. On the whole subject of your book actually comes out tomorrow, which is the 25th.
Yes.
And it's glad dementia did not make the cut, unfortunately. Looking past dementia, that's out tomorrow. How are you feeling about it? Are you excited? Are you nervous? Are you optimistic? Is there a sense of pride in there? Is it all of it?
The above.
Yeah.
All of the above. It's very exciting. Very, very, very exciting. I'm curious to see how it all goes. I'm hoping that people will find it an easy read. And I really wanted to write something that showed another side of dementia. So I hope it's helpful. I think there's a bunch of things in there that people can learn from. And also I hope that they learn from people living with dementia, because that's kind of the main theme of my book. All of my chapters are about the lessons that I've learned. So yeah, I'm pretty psyched about having it finally out there after all these years.
I'm excited for you. Anything like this where people put themselves out there, I love it. I really, I hope it goes well. And my question, I suppose one question to you about the book is, so for people who have maybe lost people who were suffering from dementia, like previously, would it also be something that maybe puts their mind at ease a little bit or helps them understand things that maybe they didn't before?
I would hope so. I mean, I hope they wouldn't read it and feel like, oh, I did everything wrong, or I should have done this, or I should have done that. I don't want people to think that at all. I know people, do the best they can with whatever education they have, whatever experiences they're having. But I'd love it if people were able to get something out of it even after the fact.
What do you want readers of the book or listeners of today's show to carry out the door? What do you want people to walk away with today?
I think I'd say the humanity of people living with dementia is so important to focus on. Look for it, find it, enjoy it. People usually have a sense of humor in there somewhere. Sometimes it's harder to pull out with some than others, but that's a great thing to dig for if you possibly can. There's so much kindness and longing that people living with dementia have in terms of forming relationships. I've just seen beautiful relationships happen between people, and it's just so important to be their friend and just treat them like a person. They're just people.
It's good enough. You are 100% right. And the last question is, if you could describe this conversation today in one sentence, what would you say?
Ooh, that's a good one. It was fun, definitely fun. One never knows what they're going to get from you, which is cool. I really enjoyed it, and thank you so much for for having me. I appreciate it. I appreciate your energy and all that you do.
I appreciate your time as well, Marysue. It's been really nice talking to you, and it's a subject that I'm really not only moved by, but something that I really think is valuable as well for people to understand. So I appreciate the work that you've done, and I will definitely be following, and the book will be on my bookshelf as soon as possible, as soon as I can get it.
Thank you.
If you wouldn't mind just indulging me, though, I always ask some quick fire questions. First question, was there any particular food in England that you actually remember, A, and B, liked?
Beans on toast.
Oh my God. All right. Okay. My missus will be all over that. My missus loves it. I can't stand beans. Oh,
love it.
Beans.
It was I think it was the first meal I had when I first arrived in London at some ungodly hour in the morning after being up, all night.
That's quality.
I remember I took the round London sightseeing tour and fell asleep on it. I don't know if that was after breakfast or before, but anyhow,
that's good. Beans
breakfast.
on toast is a good answer. I'd never heard an American say that.
Love beans on toast.
Would you go American-sized portions or British-sized portions?
Well, at this point in my life, I probably go British portions.
Would you go British sarcasm or American enthusiasm?
Oh, gosh. I do like enthusiasm. But, the British wit is pretty cool. So I don't know. I'm toss up there, 50-50.
That's a fair point in honesty. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Oh, gosh. Flying.
You're the second person
I used to dream about flying.
Really?
I remember one very clear dream I had where I flew. And ever since then, it's like, I wish I could do that again.
Fair enough. What is one Olympic sport that you seriously think you could do with minimal training?
Oh, gosh. That's really hard. Something on a sled, maybe, that you just kind of have to hang on and hope for the best.
Oh, yeah. Winter Olympia, downhill. What's it called? The skeleton?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I might be able to do that.
That is good. All right. And then last question, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. Favorite Shakespearean play? Hardest question of the day.
I guess I'd have to say Hamlet off the top of my head, but King Lear also. King Lear
and Hamlet. You've gone all the way back to Gertrude at the beginning, so I've got to take your first answer with Hamlet. Marysue, thank you so much for your time today. I wish you the best with everything, and I'll definitely speak to you soon.
Okay, hope so. Thank you so much. This was really fun.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you or someone you know has a story to share, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us via our socials or visit www.crossingthepondpodcast.com to get in touch. Please be sure to subscribe, like, or leave a comment if you can. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Across Pond Podcasting.